welcome back in umbraCoffee episode 275. And we are here today joined by our good and old friend from the Umbraco HQ now, Ken. How are you, Ken?
I'm good, thank you.
How are you guys
Already
doing?
over the busy period here. And it's sunny, and Denmark is apparently dry for the moment. So, yes, it's good.
Fingers crossed that holds out for another month, then, so we can have a
Actually, the long-term prognosis says so. So we can cross our fingers.
Yeah. I came back from the sunny Denmark to the rainy Poland, so that was not the most pleasant switch. But yeah, it has been a busy time for you, especially, and we will talk about it. Callum, what about you? How was your week?
Sunny as well, as you might be able to tell by my face. No, it was good. I caught a little bit of sun accidentally for like an hour yesterday. No, it's good. Really busy week. Busy times coming up as well with various events and various life events as well. But no, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, plenty of events. I even tried to follow up today on the local scene. What is happening? There was a marketing events, development events. Probably I don't know. It's this time of the year, just before the summer, the breaks, and the July, and maybe that's the motivation for a lot of people to just cross it out before the end of the year. And of course, we are, as it was mentioned.
We always have huge, like, it's this sort of 3-month period now just before summer, and then that 3-month period in the autumn and early winter where everything happens. So,
but now this week it has been said that it's just a month until Code Garden. So let's see what is happening just before the month of before, because it's still a lot of things to be mentioned. And we can start from RC and Umbraco 12. Because it was released and announced, and there is a blog post unrevealing the final feature set that is going to be released with the Umbraco 12, and this is the first major release in a while without framework update as well. That's
the first major release without a framework update since Umbraco 7. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's quite remarkable. But get used to it. I guess every other is going to be this way going forward, isn't it?
Yeah, hopefully.
Fingers crossed. But that comes to us with a couple of the nice features, and we'll focus on some of them more during this episode, starting from content delivery API and going through new support and maybe more extended support. And you've been guys discussing it today before the show. What this support means?
I think well, the conclusion from both Ken and I was that we don't know what it really means in practice. So someone else can talk about it at some point, maybe Bjarke or someone that's more familiar with this. But the idea that you could bring your own. Well, there is entity framework support for people that want to use EF with Umbraco within Umbraco's scopes and everything like that. And I think that's about the extent of what we know.
I think the major thing to note here is actually the first line of this section. So of course you've been able to use entity framework before if you really wanted to. I mean, it's in there. No one's keeping it from you. But now you can execute your EF stuff in the same scope as the Umbraco scope, the stuff that's going on in the core. So if you're doing something with our services and you're doing something with your own data access layers and you want it all to either succeed or to fail, then now you can do that. And that's actually pretty awesome. And don't ask me how it's done because it's magic.
We can see it here on GitHub, right? How it's done, what changes are related to this, because we've been also granted with the pull request and the whole history and discussion of the examples, why and how. And as you guys discussed, it's for more like a in-depth context-driven exchange of data, but it enables us to use both and mix it altogether without forcing us to use one or another. So
and Nikolai did a very nice post as well, a documentation post, which is I think linked from the Reese candidate blog post as well. So there's actually some really nice documentation on how you would go about plugging in EF Core in your own context here. So that's pretty nice.
No, that's really cool. I mean, we've done entity framework stuff before, and it's been a pain. And we've liked there are cases where you're doing something in a custom table and maybe updating a content item at the same time, and you need to be able to track of those, and it's been very hard. So this is definitely going to make it a lot nicer. I guess this is also the very start of perhaps where Umbraco will take itself in the coming years. I know there's been some work done to investigate what happens to the database and the persistence in general. So maybe this is the foundations of that.
There are, well, this actually ties in nicely with some of the plans we have for the delivery API. We can get back to that, but it happens incidentally to tie in nicely with some of the upcoming features for the delivery API that we now are able to use EF Core and the core. So fingers crossed, this will just enable us to do something moving forward. And yes, I mean, down the line, why not consider EF Core as the database abstraction? But that's for later, and that's we'll get there eventually, I'm sure.
Yeah. I think also from the .NET ecosystem perspective, it was like more aligned with what is out there, and for a lot of people coming to Umbraco, it was unknown why it's not there yet, right? For example, so that's why it might be more aligned with anything else.
Have this breed of developers now who've only ever known .NET Core and only ever known database persistence through entity framework, and so actually having the support does make a lot of sense.
Of course it does.
For people like me who've done it in all different ways, like I still find entity framework very frustrating, but.
Yeah, but also aligned to that, there is some dependencies updates, including image sharp 0.3. So a lot of the things bumped up to the most recent, the most awesome versions, with a couple of the breaking changes behind the scenes. So that's also to mention. But here the full list is also released in the release notes. And as it's RC, still plenty of testing, plenty of time to capture all the issues, and we've been seeing that people didn't wait. They jumped onto the train. They started testing, releasing, and updating things. But one interesting observation was that a lot of things just worked. That's unfair. That's unfair. How the things after upgrades works. No work for package creators, package maintainers. It just works. But it was funny to see, and I think this was also, of course, related with the maybe smaller framework changes or framework related changes, and maybe breaking changes not directly affecting a lot of the work in the client-facing paths. But that's exciting, and that's really cool. Same with so Kevin Jump also tested it for the using, of course, and there were some other blog posts and tweets, people showing me that how they just updated, they just run the V12 RC and things are just working. So that's really cool.
A lot of things where they've there's been very few changes to APIs and the breaking changes. The scope of those were fairly limited, and anyone that's got just a back office, like a JavaScript based package, that should work completely fine. I think there was one package that I know of that needed an update, and it was contentment. I think down to the fact of the approach that Lee's taken with multi-targeting, it was part of the issue there. I'm not fully sure what the actual change was.
I'm pretty sure that the delivery API has broken some very inner core stuff that is in public, but it is very, shall we say, rarely used. Of course, Lee uses it. That's no surprise. But it's very, very rarely used, and it ties into how properties are actually unfolded and put into the published cache. But it ties into how we're utilizing the caching for the delivery API. So we sort of had to break it. Unfortunately, sorry.
I mean, a lot of the cache anyways is been this sort of, it's public kind of, and it's concrete kind of, and it's kind of got an abstraction, but a lot of stuff is not really an abstraction. And so I guess it's nearly impossible to not make breaking changes there. So in summary, what you're saying, I think, is if you're doing naughty things and you probably shouldn't.
Yeah. Now you can see some side effects of it. But let's maybe talk about this delivery API for a little bit, because can you of course can tell us more about it, maybe show off some of the work in action. But also this was the topic that was immediately picked by the community members. Emmanuel, Carol released almost immediately after the playground and the tests, a blog post showing off the content delivery API and the headless possibilities now coming together with it. And Emmanuel, as a headless ambassador since forever, and shared this blog post and documented his journey from the installation through configuration of the endpoints, and then also the client calls and receive data from the APIs. It looks like a happy path. It looks like it's working. It looks like it does what it's supposed to do. And same with with Carol's blog post. There's plenty of examples here. Plenty. We will of course link up the articles, and Carol also shared the deep dive into content delivery APIs, but also with the follow-up blog post, which was at least from my perspective very interesting and very immediately needed, and it was restricted access to the content delivery APIs. Something what probably will be often used. So thanks, Carol, for already sharing the how process. And Ken, maybe you could tell us more about the work, because I scanned through the commits in the release, and your avatar was seen there almost everywhere. So you probably have a lot to say about it. So share your journey and something.
I have a lot to say about it, obviously. So the delivery API has been, we pretty much reworked modeling of content for this one to work, because when we have a model and we have a property that contains anything that is not basically a string, so any kind of complex model, if you will, if you try to serialize that in an API, you will probably learn that it'll yield thousands and thousands of lines of JSON. So it's entirely useless in a decoupled or headless fashion. So we've been doing a lot of work to remodel anything that needs remodeling specifically for the delivery API. A beautiful part of this is that we've been reusing the entire mechanism that we know already, the property value conversion. And that also means that this is doable for any third parties as well. Meaning custom property editors work out of the box. By default, we will return, or the API will return the same data as is created by the value converters, which I will venture in almost all the cases is fine, because you're likely already constructing pretty models for your output data. But if you need to do something like, say, we did for the content picker, if you're outputting iPublished content, you probably want to slim that down to something else. You can opt into doing that, and you can also reuse all the services that we're building all of our internals on, so you can create the same output models as we're doing, provided, of course, you have the same inputs. So this all boils down to it being pretty flexible and extending on all the extension points we already know, at least for rudimentary output. And then we have a bunch of options that will be even more fun for everyone to explore or explode, because they're actually entirely not working yet. Not all of them anyway, but we can get back to that. So the question is if we shouldn't just dive right into it.
Yes, let's have a look.
I am going to venture into this screen sharing. I have no idea if it works, but let's hope. Apparently I can only share, I can share the entire window. Thank you. Go, go, go. Yes, share it. Okay. Whoa! So here we have Umbraco, and we have I hope you can see this.
Yep.
We have a beautiful blog post set up here. We have some very Christmassy blogs. Some of you have actually seen these before. We have some authors created as well. Using the delivery API, we can grab these. We can grab them by ID. We can grab them by their routable path. We can grab them by, we've got multiple items by query. So if we went here and we set Frosty here, let's his author and image, etc. some content. Let's grab that by ID, go back to Postman, chuck in the ID. Yep, and here we have some JSON that represents Frosty the Snowman. We have a name, we have some path. I'm not going to dive deep into this. There is a lot of thought behind this, and you can read about that in the docs in the Getting Started article. So the interesting part down here is actually the property collection. As I said, we remodeled everything. So this is how a content picker would look by default. And this is how an image picker or media picker would look by default. So we created an entire new modeling layer. Here we have some RTE content. Again, this is the default output for RTE content. Specifically for RTE content, we realized that this may be very much applicable for people doing using this to create websites with, but it may also be very annoying for people using this to power apps or power something else with. So we have created a fine configuration over here, global configuration, that allows you to output rich text as JSON instead. Now, because we are in the core, we are allowed, or we are able to cache everything, which means right now the value of this RTE is actually cached for API output, so we cannot really show this, but we will go ahead and grab another item. So here we have some beautiful RTE stuff. Go ahead and grab that by ID. Now we should see that our content is outputted as a JSON structure. It gets extremely verbose. Be warned, very verbose. But this is JSON, so it zips very nicely. So
you divided all the content by the HTML elements and serialized them into the JSON box.
So we're actually utilizing HTML agility pack for this because we had that already as a dependency. We can iterate through all the elements and we can create our own structure based on those. Nice. So this is custom. It's a custom format, but we could. Thankfully, we already had the agility pack to help us out construct all this. And again, all of this is cached at core, which means we're not re-rendering all of this every time you request something. And that's one of the very benefits of being in the core. We can actually cache things at core level. We can just utilize utilize the existing new cache and amend it with additional data for delivery API output on a request. So that means we're speeding up things quite a bit.
Nice.
As I said, we can also grab stuff by query. So in our content setup here, we have 6 posts, and they are of content type post. So we will go ahead and say, please give me everything that is of content type post. Send that, and we'll get 6 items with the 6 posts. And then we can start filtering. We can start maybe sorting them by name. That didn't really look like, but it actually did change the order. For this, now we have G down here. Maybe if we sort it descending, we'll see the order change instead. Now this layer is on top, etc., etc. So we have different options here for sorting and filtering and fetching stuff that we want. Again, there's a lot to dive into, which we cannot possibly make in just a few minutes. So I will keep this brief. But this is kind of powerful. And one of the very powerful parts about this is we support different options here. Again, we have something, you can sort of think of it like a SQL. So you have something that is the select part of the SQL. It is the fetch part of the query. You have the where part of the SQL, that's the filtering, and you have the order by, that's the sort parameter in this case. Each of these parts are fully extendable. So we can opt into adding our own data and creating our own filters or selectors or whatever. And it is entirely decoupled from technology. So this bit of code actually creates a filter that lets me filter on my posts based on the ID of the author. So it's not a whole lot of code that's required to extend the built-in API. Theory, I could go ahead and say author something, and it should bring me something. I have no idea, but we can try. Demos are always right.
Live demos are always the best.
We have an author down here, Gingerbread. Let's see if we can find something by author now. No, we couldn't. Of course, we couldn't. But what the hell? This is a live demo. Probably because I need to rebuild the index or something like that. But the point is, we can extend upon all of this, and we can create our own filters and sorters, and just like that, we can append to the existing API.
Really nice. One question which I had, since you've said about the caching and kind of speed of it, have you tested it when it comes to the performance of it? Were there any kind of stress tests done so far, or you are still planning to do them? Because
we haven't done any formal stress tests. Okay. Of course, I've done some as continuously, and yes, we have moved along. And that actually led to us introducing explicit cache levels at a property level for the delivery API to speed up things even further. From what we can see right now, it is very, very performant. Compared to rendering with Razor, it's a lot faster. I'm not going to name any numbers because they won't be correct in your setup anyway. But generating JSON and serializing JSON is just way, way faster than rendering a Razor page.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we'll talk about it in a second because the community are already doing some of those stress and performance tests for you. But yeah, you can see why this would be more efficient, and you get other benefits too if you're serving JSON via an API because it will get cached in the client as well. Whereas, so subsequent calls are just going to hit that cache. Yes, you have the same thing if you've got a web page, but you still have to build the web page the first time on the server side, and every new load of that will. Yeah, it's we mentioned caching a lot. Obviously, new cache is powering a lot of this. It's great to see that the property value converters are sort of at the core of how we still manipulate those values. So it's no different whether you're using Razor or the delivery API. You mentioned examine or an index there, so I'm guessing there's an examine index backing some of these things.
There is. I can show you that as well. I also figured out why things weren't working, so that's nice. Apparently, I queried the wrong item. Never mind that. I can always go ahead and say that, right? It's easy for me to say it works, but you cannot see it. So again, I should be sharing my screen, and if we run around here to the examiner management part, we now have a delivery API content index. So if I go ahead here and search for something, you can see I have my posts. This contains now my author ID because I added the author ID in my filter. So that was part of my filter implementation here. I'll say, please return this value of author ID. So that's put into the index explicitly. A lot of weirdness going on here if you start analyzing it. Contrary to the current setup with the current indexes, we're indexing one document per culture per document because there's a performance thing that we are considering, but B, it's actually the only way we can do this correctly. We've been doing this
content to be present for that culture if it's published or not, whereas with the regular content index, it's there and you have properties on each variant property.
So the problem here is if, let's say, you go ahead and you add a new language. If we indexed things like the content index does at this point, we would have to rebuild the delivery API index. Trust me, we would, which obviously is not really a good fit for large sites. So the way we're querying this would mean that we would have to do a lot of rebuilding every time you added something by configuration, and that's just not applicable.
Makes sense.
Speaking of that, the delivery API index will not be built or kept maintained, if you will, up to date if the API is disabled, which is the default. So we're not adding additional strain on the servers to build up indexes that you're not using. Again, we know that huge sites are building huge indexes, and we don't want to add another huge index for no good reason.
Yeah, that's cool. So there's no examine stuff that you're doing here. It's all behind an abstraction. So
actually, there is plenty of examine stuff that we're doing here. You cannot see
it in your code.
Exactly. This has been entirely abstracted from the underlying technology. So down the road, it'll be possible to change the engine below. So you could swap it with something else, like I want to power my API with Elastic or whatever. We are doing some work right now to add the appropriate abstractions. Actually, one of them is currently in request, or pull request. It's not super easy, but we can make it easier than it would be right now, because right now you would really have to do a lot of code.
Yeah.
But yes, we have made sure that we're not bleeding technology. And also mentioned before, this works. If you want to play with it, it works, but please stick with is or is not for your filter operations, because the other two, which would be contains or does not contain, they simply don't work. Again, something we are, of course, are going to fix by before the 12.0 is out. But if you're playing with this, be warned, you'll be frustrated because it doesn't work. So there's that.
Another question I've got. So yeah, we had a nice little demo of this from Warren yesterday, and case sensitivity, is that a thing? And is there a way of making things case insensitive? If so,
it is a thing at this point, at least. It kind of depends. So that's the beautiful answer. So when I'm defining a field type, I'll define what kind of type is my field, and we're using this for analyzing in examine. And the idea is that any other implementation, like Elastic, like whatever, would also be using these different field types for their internal analysis of a field. So we're trying not to put too much into this, because the more we put in there, the tighter we're coupling with a known implementation. So the string raw, yes, that's case sensitive. The string analyzed is not really case sensitive, but we know that this is going to play in with the contains, does not contain. So an insensitive complete match might be tricky to build right now. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's, I was wondering here. So, well, yeah, this is sort of, as you say, blurring the lines between your abstraction and examine. So you don't want to get too dependent in here. I've obviously got a package that's a big feature of it is customizing how values are stored in search indexes. And I was just thinking about ways I could expose that so that, an example, I can index pickers as both their GUIDs and also their URL segment. So I can query by like a slug for a category. It just keeps querying friendlier. And I was thinking how I could do that. Of course, I guess I can still intercept all the index stuff on the examine side here, but this abstraction probably limits itself to just
so the abstraction is built as bare bones as we could, because we want to start with as little as possible and then expand upon it as we see the needs grow. So that's one thing. I mean, something you're able to do is you're opting into creating the fields, and you're not tied to just having one field for your thing. You could have multiple fields if you wanted to. So you could store different values if you really wanted to. And you're also in charge of fetching the field values again. So if let's say you wanted to do something culture invariant, maybe you would store things culture invariant and make sure that you also queried them culture invariant. That is one option at least.
Yeah, but so field types themselves are not like a pluggable concept where it's a defined list of things.
Right now it's an enum.
Yeah.
So it is that simple right now, because again we're trying to keep this as pragmatic and as tiny, if you will, as possible. Because if we want to build additional providers in the community, we don't want to have a massive implementation task in front of us if we can avoid it.
I think generally that's the issue which we had and still have with Umbraco implementation, that we had too many possibilities, and it was used by so many custom ways of extending this. Now it all needs to be gathered into one big unified way and still being kind of standard way of doing things from now on. And you mentioned, Ken, before we went live, that it's the way how it's done now. It's a kind of collaborative and also gathered knowledge and lessons from the previous headless implementations and libraries, and also approaches to content delivery APIs, combining also hardcore lessons learned over the time and multiple other things. So if there will be questions why, I'm sure there will be an answer to that one. Why the things are like that, or why they are limited.
These lessons, this API will at some point come to hardcore as well. Is that
exactly? So some of the very hard learnings that hardcore has done with their REST APIs have been boiled into this, so we're not repeating those same things. And as I said before, I'm not going to dive into what that route with start items was, but that's one of the hard learnings that hardcore had, which we have implemented in this spec as well. And interestingly, the specification that we started building on was written by hardcore. So the hardcore team wrote the spec, we've implemented it, and of course the goal is eventually hardcore will re-implement the same spec, either by utilizing the implementation we have or doing something on their own side. It sort of depends on how their work progresses in terms of versioning.
From what we know about their setup from the times we've had Morten and Rasmus on, like, we know that it's not strictly just a standard Umbraco site. They've got their own like delivery content cache or in Postgres. So these abstractions do, I guess, start to come into play there as well, where they could decide at some point that we're not going to talk to Examine, we're going to talk to our Postgres database instead, or something.
So the beauty part of having a common spec, common API spec, would be that if you learn this, you can sort of apply it to hardcore and to CMS as well. So if you're building purely headless content or using headless content as your thing, then you can sort of say, well, I want this project to run in cloud, and I want to use the cloud as my delivery layer, and maybe another project's better fit in hardcore. Well, you can roll hardcore instead, and you can reuse all the knowledge you've gained from either or, and hopefully also the utilities you build around it.
Yeah, I was going to say, hopefully if the URL scheme is fairly similar or the same, then your concept of a filter and those sorts of endpoints, you're just changing the endpoint, and you could take your site from being self-hosted to hardcore with fairly little effort, hopefully.
Yeah, that's the general idea, right?
Yeah, awesome.
Fingers crossed, and probably also a lot of testing is still required to help you and the team to get more of it. But as Callum mentioned, some people were already testing this and giving it a go. And Soren was the one who set up a demo with Astra, which also gains a lot of traction and attention recently when it comes to static site generation and all the other plenty stuff. And he set up the demo and found that Razor views in this case were faster than Astra calls, but delivery API in the Astra, probably in the also development instance, is calling the APIs every time when it fetches the data. So it's not storing the requests and responses in any cache layer. But it was interesting to see, because I saw it for the first time and said, where is this performance coming? But I know that in some of our team's challenges, we also consolidated a lot of calls. Let's say here he said that there are 3 requests to the API, one for the homepage, one for the root node, and one for the something else and children. So it can consolidate it to one call and then saved a lot of milliseconds. And here we're talking about milliseconds, so it's every millisecond matters. But it was a really interesting find. Really interesting find.
Definitely does, but again, if you need to build your custom APIs on top of this, you're still able to. Again, like I said,
Yeah.
you can pull out other services that we've done for the delivery API, and you can reuse them in your own API. So if you need to build that thing that otherwise would cost you 10 different requests to get this and get that and then get this, then by all means build your own API on top of it. You reuse our implementations and grab the response, have the same models hopefully generated, and then we're all good.
Lovely.
More of it to come, and please, people, if you will be playing around testing, stress testing, and load testing this, share your findings, because that will be the lessons for us all before we'll all reach out the point where we'll be testing it. So yeah, that's about the V12 delivery APIs and all the other crazy things released recently. And there were a couple other releases that we can mention also this week. Callum, you've got the contentment updated release today. This is coming to support version 12 NRC. So that's that was released. Really fun, nice naming, by the way. And also Pulsil released his Quick Blocks.
Promised last week. He did
Yes.
promise within a week and released it a few days later. So kudos, Paul.
Yeah, well delivered. And the next one is a GraphQL package, community package that was a little bit left behind, but now it got some attention, and Andrew and some other team members and people from the community made the efforts to make it released and support for version 9 and 10, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was for version 9 and 10. Yep. So that's here, and if anyone wants to use the GraphQL queries, it can be done there. And that's
there's some gains that can be made in this with the new caching stuff you've done there, Ken, where like you could be using the stuff that the delivery API actually uses, rather than, I think currently it has to build up a whole big in-memory model of sort of your entire content structure. And I'm sure if someone gets some time or has an itch they want to scratch, maybe that will get investigated.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. And there were a couple of events to be mentioned from this week. It was plenty of events, as we discussed at the beginning. But there was a Umbraco London meetup yesterday. And Callum, you've been attending, so you can tell us more about the topics and content.
Great evening, great talks. We had a talk from Richard. We had a talk from Mike Macy, who summarized Umbrad, which was the other event that happened yesterday, Global Accessibility Awareness Day, Umbraco edition. Loads of excellent talks I've seen from that. We had some great demos from Warren. We had some great chats. Mikkel, your colleague, did a fantastic demo about composable architecture, and there was a lot of questions and conversations coming off of that. Yeah, loads of things. And then also this week, Umbraco Copenhagen meetup happened. The Umbraco Sydney meetup happened yesterday. The Umbraco Umbracumri meetup happened yesterday. So much stuff. So yeah, people in the chat, let us know if you managed to go to an event, and if you were at Umbrad. I unfortunately missed it. If it was a success, what your highlights were. Keen to know.
Yeah, that would be really good. And still plenty of events ahead of us. And we've mentioned them already a couple of times, but it's always worth to remember and remind us all about it. So May 23rd, Adam and Pritesh are going on the road and starting from the event in the Umbraco Manchester group. And there are some talks out there. The day after, no, couple of days later. Yeah, the week after, in June, the Leeds meetup group, and the same set of discussions and talks out there. There are some videos from Kerala Umbraco user group on YouTube channel. This is the community. No, it's a separate channel. So
they've started to record their meetups and put them on YouTube, and I had a little listen to one earlier. They're really good and some great talks in there. So maybe go check them out. A community that perhaps in well, at least in Europe and maybe the US, the community doesn't know all that much about. Go check out some of these talks. And I like this as a format. I think it started up during COVID and it's been virtual. So there's no excuse not to record them. And if people are happy to have their recording put on YouTube, then that's great. I hope more meetups would do this. Yeah.
And now also there is no excuse to not hit subscribe button. Also, also on our channel, because that's a cross promotion, that's a cross contribution between between YouTubers. And yeah, hit the subscribe button, and like the video, and share it with your friends. And let's move on. 4 weeks until Code Garden. That's what has been said. So we are still counting down. Nothing is being changed around the agenda and programs from the recent update. But yeah, check it out. Subscribe. Sign up if you haven't yet, and we'll all see each other in a month from now. But maybe in relation to that, we can talk about Umbraco Awards, because that was something what was released this week. Umbraco Awards nominees. Guys, did you check the nominees from your side? Yeah. What do you think about them?
I mean, I can talk to the packages because I was part of the jury for that. It was a very interesting experience. I reviewed about 35 packages last weekend, installed them all, got started. If people, again, in the chat, let us know if you'd like to get a bit of an insight into that whole process. I'd love to share it on another episode someday. We can go through it and go through maybe even why some did or didn't get nominated, if specific reasons. If that sounds interesting, let us know. But yeah, a really interesting selection of packages, and we've introduced this Hall of Fame idea because there's some notable mentions that are so worthy of winning, but at the same time we need to leave some space for some other people. So I think quite obvious that why those 3 packages were chosen to be in that Hall of Fame. But you'll hear more about that at Code Garden. But yeah, loads of other very interesting solutions nominated for the other awards. Couple of heavy hitters from different agencies. I think Perplex have got 4 nominations. I think they said across all the categories. Yeah, there's a few solutions in here that I'm aware of, and I know that they're fantastic. So I'm sure it's a very, very high bar this year.
Yeah, same. I'm always inspired by the websites being nominated there, and of course I reverse engineered some of them already. I checked them and visited the sites because I'm always curious about them. But same with the packages. Maybe we are that fortunate that we discussed most of them during the umbraCoffee episodes, and all of the releases were not that surprising, but still a very nice selection. And yeah, looking forward to the winners, and plenty of good agencies and good projects being nominated for that one. So yeah, until Code Garden and the awards ceremony out there. Events. One more event popped out on the map again, and it's a Dutch Umbraco user group and Dutch Umbraco community conference, in short Dutch Festival 23, and it's 28th September in Utrecht again. So Callum, you've been probably on all of them, right? So far.
I've been told, yeah, very a lot of them. The CFP is open. It's actually been open for quite a while, and people didn't know. Finally got promoted this week, so yeah, go submit your talk ideas. I saw a few people from inside and slightly outside the community have submitted some stuff already, so that's really excellent. And I'll be thinking up some ideas too, I'm sure. It's always a great event, like the events that Henk and Arnold put on, and the space that they're based in Utrecht is excellent. So highly recommend this event. So it's one of my favorites of the year.
That's true. And last on the events list is Code Cabin, and it's as we disclaimed that it was fake, that the subscriptions are closed. They're still open, and there's still plenty of time. A month. So not that plenty of time.
It's like 6 weeks ago. But, yeah, start thinking now. I'm sure at Code Garden, Matt and Lucy will be going around and reminding everyone to apply, but people will always leave it to the last day anyway, and some will forget. So we'll keep reminding you.
Never enough. Cool. A couple more things before we wrap up. Marketplace update. That's something what was also described today. It's a fresh article and summary written by Andy about the updates on the marketplace platform. I've been refreshing multiple times the marketplace recently, because we've been, of course, demoing some of the packages, checking out them, and it was obviously seen that something is going on there. There are some updates happening, and it got some improvements also in the listings, but also under the hood, which are all listed and gathered here. And I was interested with this one, with the Redis cache and cognitive services being applied there. It seems really interesting, and I'm curious how it will improve the general UX of the platform, because we use it more and more often now. And yeah,
I spoke with Andy this morning about some of this, and he said when things are a bit less busy, like post V12, sometime in the future, that they'll come on and they'll talk a little bit about the marketplace and the back-end architecture there, because it's not a standard website. It's a system with like a full microservice type system. Could be a really interesting thing to look at, and just see how HQ are doing things with the cloud product and also marketplace. So at some point in the future, that will happen.
It is pretty interesting. We've had some internal demos as well, and it looks really really cool.
Yeah. And from the same perspective, from the package creators' perception, how to use these metrics, how to stand out, how to promote, how to work out the new users of the packages. We know that we've been talking a lot about the metrics, the inspirations from the WordPress and other ecosystems on how we can make it better. And it seems to be still worked on behind the scenes, and looking forward for more free time on Andy's slate and team's slate to discuss it more in depth. So yeah, that's it. And two couple more things, 3 or 4. One is also on Umbraco blog. It's a part 3 of a blog read editor deep dive article series from Niels. Again, a huge dose of hows and whys and the ways of doing things with the blog grid editor. So I won't be sharing too much, but Kenn, you've been also playing a lot with it and doing a lot of demos yourself. I still remember your great CSS skills. Yeah, I think it will be good to explore more of this and learn how to use it, because there's still plenty of things to do with that one. And 3 more blog posts. One from Soren about creating duplicate content in Umbraco without duplicating content. It's a really interesting one about canonical URLs, all the other underlying SEO stuff here, and I'm heavily encouraging everyone to check it out. Tips from Paul about going to Code Garden. So again, if someone wants to prepare and do a lesson before going to the conference and all around activities, including scooters, right? From Paul. I love it. Check out this blog post from Paul. And last but not least, if all of us wants to learn about the power of in-person events such as Code Garden and all the other conferences, the great Candid contribution team recorded this episode on Spark, right? It was during the Umbraco Spark with some of the people being involved in organizing events like this and the power of them here. And that's probably all from the list. I hope that I didn't miss anything from my tabs. Anything else, guys, from your side to add?
I think we caught everything, yeah. Busy week. Lots of features.
Very.
And Kenn, great demo. Again, great work around this delivery API and all the other things there, and keeping fingers crossed for effective RC period and effective testing.
Yes, we are really hoping that people will spend time breaking this. Call it me encouraging you to break it. Please do it, because if it can be broken, which it probably can, then by all means let's fix that before we go into the 12.0. We're very happy with it so far. The ease of use is actually very good. So we're quite happy with it as it is right now. But please do break it, challenge it, see what you can come up with. We have more than a few things that we are going to fix before the RC, and most of it ties around the limitations part of the getting started article. So we are fixing a few of those, at least a bulk of those.
And then you are not going to an idle mode, but you are still jumping back on the next major things, right? Because version 13, version 14, all the other crazy things ahead of you guys. So yeah.
Again, the next both the minors and majors will prove a lot of stuff. like I said, we built the EF core stuff. One of the reasons why it's in V12, other than we want it, is if and when we're doing member authentication for the delivery API, we need EF core to power OpenID Dict, which is also included in V12 as a dependency now. So we're sort of pulling ahead, if you will, to build stuff later that requires dependencies that we won't introduce in a minor. So yes,
Very smart. It's so crazy to see how much planning is now going on at HQ, like forward planning, where before it was just like, yeah, might be soon, might
hit the button. Yeah, good, but that's good. That's exactly how and why we can predict things and react to them accordingly instead of fighting fires all the time. Even though we fight fires somewhere else, but that's completely fine. Yeah, own fires. But yeah, good. Keep it up, and yeah, whenever you will have anything new, exciting to demo, discuss, and share, be sure to join us again for a great walkthrough. And make people break it and share your feedback and share your examples and also the ways how you used or explored the delivery APIs and all the other things from the recent versions. And yeah, we'll see each other on the next week where we'll discuss everything new there. And like subscribe.
Like and subscribe. We're 889 subscribers. Really, we should get to 900 by next week. I think we'll set that as the goal. So yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting to observe how we fail every week with our goals.
Every week.
Every week, every year. That's if anyone will want to discuss learning by failure or generally the psychology of being YouTubers, please reach out to us during the Code Garden and support us.
Awesome.
Tough YouTuber's life. But yeah, thanks, Ken, and thanks everyone for being with us today. And yeah, as usual, let's catch up next Friday. Have a good weekend and the rest of the day today, guys.